Strings are complicated. They're confusing. I mean, let's be real. There are so many different brands and gauges and coatings and all sorts of different variables that exist when it comes to picking out which strings are going to work best for you. For anyone just starting out, I mean, how the heck do you know what to put on your guitar? It's confusing as hell. The purpose of this video is for me to give you guys as much information as I possibly can on strings. I've worked in this store a long time and I've gotten to know all the different brands behind me. By the way, there are over 40 different packs behind me, and this is by no means an exhaustive selection either. It's complicated. But before we get into it, there are 3 points I'd like to very quickly make. Number one, strings are very subjective. So I'm not really going to be talking about which strings sound better or which don't sound better. I can give you some descriptive words, I can do that. But in terms of which strings you are going to like the best, that's up to you to figure out. You're going to just have to play with some strings and experiment. The second thing is, I'm only talking about 6-string guitars. We do sell strings for banjos, ukuleles, violins, violas, cellos, mandolins, all sorts of things like that, bass guitars. But in this video, I'm only focusing on 6-string guitars. And then the third point is that I can only really discuss brands that are in this shop. Okay, there are lots of brands out there that I don't know anything about because we've never sold them here. Just to be clear about that, these are the most popular brands at least that we've worked out over the past couple of years with lots of market research, going by what sells best and by trying out different brands in the shop and seeing what sells. These are the most popular brands in your cheaper range, your middle range, and your most expensive range. That being said, without any further preamble, let's dive right in. All right, now, first things first, there are 4 different ways that we can categorize strings, 4 ways that we talk about strings, right? Any pack of strings you get, there are 4 bits of information that matter. Typically, when customers come in and they ask for a set of strings, they don't worry about the latter 2 that we'll talk about later. But I'm still going to discuss them just to be thorough. The first is, what kind of guitar do you have? In other words, are you playing a classical guitar, an acoustic guitar, or an electric guitar? To clarify what that means, a classical guitar is a nylon string. That's these guys here, all right? An acoustic guitar is a steel string. That's these guys. An electric guitar is also a steel string, but it's an electric guitar. They're actually different strings. If you put electric strings onto an acoustic guitar, the sound will be very sort of dead. They will almost sound like old strings, and that's because an electric guitar, the pickups are different. The pickups on an electric guitar are picking up movement, not sound, if you follow what I'm saying. So it's a different way the strings get made. All right, the next way we categorize strings is by gauges. Now, the gauge is the thickness of the strings. With acoustics, they typically range from 9s to 13s is about the thickest I've seen. By the way, when we talk about that number, it's a 9 gauge or a 10 gauge or 11 or 12. We're talking about the thickness of the thinnest string. This particular pack, because it's 6 strings, it's 12, 16, 24, 32, 42, and 53. That's the measurements of each string. We use the thinnest string, which is a 12. That tells us this is a 12 gauge pack, right? Acoustic strings, that's what their range typically is. With electric strings, they range, I've seen as light as 7s, and they also go up to 13s, is about the thickest I've seen. But with classical strings, it's a unique situation. They don't really have gauges. There are packs that do sometimes. I will get to that in a second. But typically, the way that they talk about gauges with classical strings is soft, normal or medium, and hard tension. You'll see it actually says there normal tension in the corner. You also get normal soft and normal hard. And by the way, when they talk about soft tension, those gauges are going to be thinner strings than hard tension, okay? So there are gauges to them, it's just not really how they are marketed. The third way we categorize strings is different coatings. Now, coatings, unfortunately, get rather complicated. To be honest with you, often tell people coming into this shop, don't even worry about coatings unless you already have a favorite brand and you've been playing for a long time. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, right? Because the problem is different brands have different coatings, different technologies, different terminologies that they use. As an example, Elixirs use nano webs and they've got poly webs. These are different ways. There's a third one that I've gone blank on what it's called. Those are the different coatings that they have in their technological lineup. D'Adario's, you get phosphor bronze and you get bronze. And as for the difference, well, according to the packaging, both of them are anti-corrosive apparently. Phosphor bronze is going to give you a warm, bright and balanced tone. Straight up bronze, it says deep, bright, projecting tone. I feel like, having played around with these strings, I feel like phosphor bronze is slightly warmer. Straight up bronze is slightly brighter. That's just what I've heard. Yeah, you just have to experiment and see what you like. But if you're just starting out, don't worry too much about coatings. You'll figure that out later on. All right, the final way that we categorize strings, or we talk about strings, is the windings. Now, the winding, to explain what I'm talking about, I've got this string here, and hopefully you can see. It's going to be a bit difficult. Hopefully that focuses well. This is a 52 gauge, which is the thickest string on your guitar. It's a steel string, you can tell by the way because of the bead, and hopefully you can see that. But in any case, it's how this thing is wound. Now this is round wound, okay? You also get flat wound, which is what this pack is here. This is what a set of round wound strings would look like. Typically they don't say whether they're round or flat. If there's no sort of indication on the packaging, you just take it as being round wound. Those are your most common types. The difference being that round wound will give us conventional wound give us a brighter tone. They are the most commonly used in most genres. Flat wound gives us a much warmer tone, not much, a slightly warmer tone. It's more for jazz playing, right? You'll commonly find these things on jazz guitars and stuff. That's really it. That's all you need to know about flat wound. They also feel a lot smoother, by the way. I found that it's almost like playing on silk. They're beautiful strings. In conclusion, the best way to get to know which strings are going to work best for you is honestly to just try out different strings. I'm very fortunate in that I happen to work in a music shop. I restring multiple guitars every day. So I've had the opportunity of getting to try out basically every string pack you can see on the shelf here, including some that you don't see here. We had a set of Martins, for instance, that I got to put on someone's guitar and try out. So this is why I have a very clear picture in my mind of what strings I like on my guitars. But like I say, unfortunately, the only way is to just try out different guitars. That having been said, if you want to know what my personal preferences for what it's worth, for my acoustic guitar, I use Elixirs. They are the best to me. They're the most expensive, sure, but I do get an employee discount here, so it makes it worth it. To me, I love them. They are staying in tune like nobody's business. They sound fantastic, and they're lasting a long time. You're not getting that dull sound that starts to creep in over time. They're lasting. It's amazing. With my electric guitar, I'm still experimenting. Elixirs I threw onto one of my guitars, a little bit too cold of a sound for my liking personally, so I'm going to be trying out some Dean Markleys. Those, we don't often sell those, but I'm curious. But typically for me, with my electric, I typically go only balls. Regular slinkies, I like 10s. I don't like to go that nice on my electric. With my acoustic, I also typically use 10s. And with classical, there we go. With classical, be honest with you, $100. I'm not sure how well known this brand is around the world, but certainly in my country, these are my favorite ones. They're sort of a middle range in terms of price, but these are surprisingly good. A popular brand we sell is also D'Addario Classics, which I showed you, but honestly, I prefer the sound of these. They aren't, so nylon strings typically have a very warm sound to them, and nylon string guitars, and if you're used to steel string and the warm sound is putting you off a bit. $100 are a little bit brighter, so I prefer a slightly brighter sound myself. That's what I would recommend. Again, it's a very subjective thing. Don't just go by what I've said. Try things out, experiment. In any case, I really hope this video has been helpful. It's difficult to make these kinds of videos because it's so subjective. I hope this has given you a good idea next time you walk into a shop to buy strings. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.